And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Lindsay Heisman. She's a clinical sales and support representative with Restorative Therapies. She's been working in neurological disability since 1995, began her career in home health and respite care with pediatric population, and began her focus on post-acute physical health and well-being for the spinal cord injury population at an exercise-based facility in 2003. She's involved with planning and fundraising for the Alan T. Brown Foundation and Unite to Fight Paralysis and Race to a Walk. Thank you very much for coming. Lindsay Heisman.
And I'm going to really hope for no more technical difficulties. So I'm Lindsay. I know I look familiar to some of you, although probably not initially because I'm not tethered to an FES bike, but I am involved with more than that, and I hope that the information that I've gathered over the last 8 years of working with spinal cord injuries and going to different science symposiums and so forth will be helpful to some of you and that I can answer a lot of your questions. So the topic is Healthy Now, Ready for the Future, maintaining optimal health for clinical trial candidacy and overall well-being. I need to thank a bunch of people first. This lecture started as a 5-minute introduction for Wise Young at a fundraiser last summer. And I was asked to present here, and this was my idea since FES cycling had already been spoken about. To my good fortune, Dr. Jean Zanka gave a presentation on clinical trials at Rutgers just in July. So she lent me some of her slides, and her presentation is up on the Rutgers website. It's more detailed than what I offer in clinical trials because mine's more of an overview. Dr. Boninger at UPMC has done a tremendous amount of research on maintaining the integrity of the shoulder following spinal cord injury, so a lot of information was taken from research that he has done. Susan Testa is a really wonderful dietitian and nutritionist who participates in our advanced course for spinal cord injuries and FES cycling, and I've gotten a lot of useful information from her lecture. And Scott Chesney is an international life coach and speaker who himself has a spinal cord injury, and he was kind enough to sit and talk about living life following spinal cord injury, and he's at the end of the lecture. Restorative therapies, my job is really great. I get to help people use a great product better. I get to introduce people who don't know about the product and what it can do for them. And my job really supports me in doing things like this. So I thank them. Every single dedicated physical therapist and occupational therapist or clinical staff member that I've ever worked with, I continue to learn from you guys every single day, and I wouldn't have half this presentation if I didn't have the opportunity to work with you. And every individual living with a spinal cord injury, you guys are why I continue to do this, and you're also my motivation sometimes when I don't feel like getting up and exercising, when I feel too lazy to do something. I think, well, I can and I should. There's people who would love to be able to do that. And I didn't list it. I'm so sorry. I thank Boston Medical Center for putting on this lecture series. I think it's fantastic. So thank you for having me. I'm going to show a commercial that was aired, I want to say it was 7 or 8 years ago during the Super Bowl. Some of you may have seen it and forgotten about it. Some of you may have never seen it. Let's see if I can get it to play. So that was a commercial that was aired, I believe it was an investment company that put that out. And of course it was when Christopher Reeve was still alive, and there were a lot of people who thought, wow, there must have been something that happened that was kept undercover and there's some curative therapy. And as we know, that's not the case. And I think that it's a common misconception about what clinical trials may do. And of course, we all hope that it will eventually, but the science isn't quite there yet. There's different expectations for clinical trials, and I hope to clear up what the expectation is for where we're at in this country with clinical trials, what different phases of clinical trials mean to us. So I'm going to provide an overview, what's happening with clinical trials and when can we expect something to happen, and what your responsibility is as someone with a spinal cord injury to meet the science halfway. If you're waiting for the science to present something magical, you're potentially not going to be a really good candidate for what they come up with. So how do you make yourself a better candidate? And there's 5 main points: nutrition, shoulders, taking care of your shoulders, standing, exercising, and life, basically living life now, how to have a fuller life now. And then I'll review, and there were some resources outside, and I'm sure they'll be presented online as well. So what exactly is a clinical trial, and where are we at? Clinical trials are health-related studies in humans. Okay, they have to start with animals so that we know the basic science is doing something useful. Did this mic shut off? We good? Okay. There's 2 major types of clinical trials. There's observational trials and interventional trials. The ones that we're looking at with more hope for regaining function, of course, are the interventional trials. But the observational trials are necessary to know what's happening now. What are people doing in their everyday life now? What are we doing in therapy now? And how is this going to interact with interventional studies? So no treatment is assigned. Generally, it's surveys, things of that nature. For interventional, participants are assigned a specific treatment and outcomes are very closely monitored and measured. For this, the volumes keep changing. For this lecture, what I'm really focused on are the curative interventions. There are a whole bunch of different clinical trials that are available now that deal with different pieces of having a spinal cord injury. So there's trials that look at pain. There's trials that look at hand function, spasticity, different things of that nature. But a lot of the questions that I get when I'm working with spinal cord injuries is, when are we going to have a cure? When can I get out of this chair? When can my quality of life improve? And the best resources that I know of that look at these curative interventions are UniteToFightParalysis.org and SCINetusa.org, which is the work that Wise Young is doing, and I think it's fantastic that he's going to be here next week, so you have time to think about what you want to pick his brain on. So there's some key characteristics of clinical trials. Keep in mind, there's not just one group of people who are receiving a treatment. It's not just a group of people who are getting this therapy that we think might have some positive outcomes. You need to compare it against a control group. So realistically, you have to bear in mind that there's a likelihood that you will be in a control group, and that's not a bad thing because the control group isn't getting anything. You're not just observed. You're going to get the best standard of clinical care. So whatever therapy we can offer, and from that, you can get benefits in itself. It's random assignment. You can't buy your way into one of the trials that are happening here or convince somebody that you're going to be a better candidate than someone else. So it is true random assignment. They use very, very thorough, valid, well-established outcome measures, and it's an intensive process. It takes a long time. Why have these trials taken so long? Why aren't trials starting immediately? There's a very lengthy process that we look at in this country. Our government is very strict because the main point is that we do no harm. Spinal cord injury isn't a degenerative disease, something like ALS or cancer or a progressive MS. It's something that happens, and unless there's a secondary complication, your function levels out. So we don't want to take away function that you have or put you in a worse health position than you're in. So they're very cautious. They undergo strict review. Funding is a difficult thing. Relative to other diseases or indications, spinal cord injury is a smaller population. So there's some very proactive and creative people trying to bring awareness and get funding for this, but it is very expensive and it's very time intensive. So that's part of the reasons why it takes so long to get from the bench to the bedside. And in the States, there should be, with our government and our regulations, for these kinds of trials, there should be no fee. So if you're involved in something and they're asking you to pay, I would ask a lot of questions. So the phases of trials. For the most part, the trials that we're hearing about are in phase 1. And basically in phase 1, they're not expecting to have any fantastic outcomes. They're just making sure that we're not doing any harm. Most of the phase 1s in this country are, the group is limited to acute spinal cord injury up to the first 14 days, motor complete, so AIS-A, so complete injury level from T10 to C5. And the reason for that is at ASIA A spinal cord injury is the most complete that there is. So again, thinking of not wanting to take away function, they're just being very cautious. So that's these early trials. The only trials that I know of that are moving forward in this country are the trials that Wise Young is doing for chronics. So he's looking at people who have stable neurological condition more than 1 year post-injury. But he also is looking initially at complete injuries within that same level. And he can explain very, very clearly why it's important. When you move into phase 2, then you're looking to evaluate effectiveness, determine if there's any value over the control group that's just receiving therapy. Because for some therapies, it's very likely that the physical therapy that accompanies the surgery is causing the benefit. So we want to make sure that we're not doing an unnecessary surgery to get the benefits that you're seeing. There's so many people that I've worked with who have spent a lot of money to get therapies overseas, and all these doctors tell them, well, you need to go back and you need to be active, and we have to maximize this therapy. And maybe some of these people haven't been in physical therapy for a while, so the changes that they're seeing have to do with the physical activity that they're getting. So for a controlled trial, we want to make sure that it's more than that. When you get into phase 3, you're then confirming effectiveness, monitoring any side effects, and then comparing it against existing treatments. And then phase 4 is when it's more available to larger groups. So in between any of these phases, you're looking at making sure the government says it's okay, that it's safe, and then getting more funding and submitting more safety paperwork to go on to the next phase. So this is why it takes years and years, because if there's any holdup, then it could be months and more funding before you can go ahead, get the okay. Then it's recruiting subjects. And everyone says, yes, I want to be a subject. I don't care if this sounds like it's going to be great, but it's a very time-intensive process. And everybody is looking at safety first. So it's a lot more complex than it initially seems. It's not just someone has a great therapy and let's try it. So that's what this picture is. And I don't think you can see it on here, but there's where it says, I think you should be more explicit here in step 2. It's step 2 is, and then a miracle occurs. So we'd love for that to happen. I'd love for a therapy to be developed that presents like that commercial I showed. But unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of work in between and a lot of meeting the science. So it's very important to be physically ready. Every science lecture that I have ever been to, every conference where they talk about potential cures for the future, all of the scientists say you must be proactive about your physical health in order to be a candidate. So there's some things that might exclude someone from being a candidate, and these include fever, any kind of active infection, recurring UTIs, unhealed pressure sore, metabolic conditions like diabetes, that will impact your ability to heal following some sort of surgery. Physical limitations, severe osteoporosis, a lot of muscle atrophy, contractures. If you'd received a cell therapy prior to this, or any kind of transplant therapy, it may restrict if you're able to be involved in the therapy. And it makes me nervous because I know that people want so badly to be involved in these things. And I have a friend who's had her spinal cord injury about 20 years now, who has gone for therapies elsewhere. And she says, well, why would I have to tell them? It's your health and it's your body. And if there's something that can impact how this will turn out and you don't tell the doctor something very, very important, we don't know how that's going to interact. So it is a very important thing. And aside from that, good health is going to, aid in your ability to heal following some sort of surgery. Or if there's some unpleasant side effect, your body's going to be in a better position to fight it or tolerate it. So, of course, the ultimate goal for curative therapies is walking, and that's what a lot of the researchers are measuring progress against. It's the main outcome. And of course, they'll look at a whole list of other outcomes. In fact, Wise will probably, Dr. Young will probably speak about lithium and its impact that he's seen on some patients with pain. Or he'll say to me afterwards, "Why did you bring that up?" No, he will talk. He'll talk about that. There may be some other positive side effects that happen in between, but ultimately people want to know, how am I going to walk again? And the need for walking requires quite a bit. Proper nutrition for energy and maintaining your weight. Being upright for the first time in X number of years is going to be much more difficult if you're carrying a lot of extra person. Healthy shoulders for weight bearing. Again, it's not going to be like that commercial with Christopher Reeve. Often there's likely going to be some sort of maximum assistance, maybe a platform walker and then crutches before independent walking. Tolerate being upright, of course. If you can walk, you have to be upright for a period of time, and physically fit. So maybe you don't have to be like Ronnie Coleman, who's pictured down here bench pressing something ridiculous, who's Mr. Olympia 5 times over, but you do need to be in good physical condition. I have to say this disclaimer: everybody's condition is different. Everyone has an individual situation, and I cannot comment on individual situations, not having treated somebody and not being your physician. So this lecture is intended as an overview, and it's a reminder likely of things you've heard before. I know that when you're first injured and you have all this new stuff thrown at you in inpatient, and so much that you have to learn in outpatient, and your therapists do a fantastic job of trying to give you everything and get you all the tools that you need to be as independent as possible, but there's a whole lot of information that's lost. So some of this might go, "Oh yeah, this is familiar," and some of you may say, "Yes, I hear this all the time," but it's all together as yet another reminder of what you should really do to keep as healthy as possible. And always, always consult with your physician or some medical professional. If I say something and you say, "Well, I'd like to have this as part of my program now," don't say because Lindsay said so. Go to your doctor, go to your therapist, make sure that it's okay for you before you attempt to change anything that you're doing now. So I'll talk first about nutrition and spinal cord injury. So there's not a whole lot of research out there specific to the spinal cord population, and I tried to put together as much as I could come up with. There's a lot that you're battling. That initial loss of lean muscle tissue when you're immobile, when you're first hurt, there's a very, very quick wasting and loss of muscle, and that initially accounts for weight loss. And then you're not doing much because you're not as mobile, you're not getting up out of bed and going to the bathroom, going into the kitchen, walking around every day. So resting metabolism, resting expended energy is significantly lower once you have a spinal cord injury. The decreased immobility often causes significant or can cause metabolic changes, so glucose intolerance, chronic inflammation, cardiovascular disease. And this big change can profoundly affect interactions with people, how you view yourself, psychosocial and functional health. And it can make independent mobility especially challenging. Then when you go home after being in the hospital and everything's monitored and your meals are prepared, you go back to your old ways and eat how you used to and the calories you used to taking in, and a lot of people have a very hard time keeping their weight under control. So as I mentioned, it's very understudied. I said earlier that spinal cord injury, in comparison to the population at large, is a relatively small population, so with most everything else, there's a lack of funding for this type of thing. There was one study I found from 2006 that was supportive of an interventional program, Surprise, that combines diet and exercise to help maintain weight, and this is true across any population. So I would venture to say that if you did another study, you'd probably find something similar. There is no definitive research for using supplements with a spinal cord injury. I see this as a common topic on the CareCure forums when people are talking about working out and they want to know what supplements do I take for building muscle mass and that sort of thing. And there just isn't research for this population. Your best resource is going to be a clinical nutritionist or registered dietitian for individual medical nutrition therapy. Most hospital systems that treat spinal cord injury have someone who's a really fantastic resource. If you're looking for another resource, I have Susan's information at the end of this presentation. So what do we know for nutrition and spinal cord injury? There was a calculation done for what an ideal weight should be based off of weight guidelines for the able-bodied population. So looking at height and body size, the guideline was basically to subtract 5 to 10% from that number if you have a T-level injury or lower, and subtract 10 to 15% if you're a C-level injury. And this adjustment is based on loss of lean muscle tissue or muscle mass. So trying to explain this one calorie calculation kind of makes my brain hurt, and it never comes out the way that I want to. So basically, if you're trying to figure out how many calories is ideal for your body size and your height, based on whether you have a lower level injury or higher level injury, you have to translate the weight that you want to be into kilograms, and then multiply it by 22.7 for cervical level or 27.9 for a T level. And of course, this is dependent on other factors such as gender, function, your activity level. So if you're a triathlete or a rugby player or a cyclist, you're probably going to need more calories. Protein, you don't have to go overboard if you're bodybuilding. Generally 0.8 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. Too much, this is something I learned from Susan's lecture, too much protein can draw out calcium from your bones. And this is especially important in this population because you're already at higher risk for osteoporosis. As with everyone, fluid intake is important. Make sure it's at least 7 to 8 cups of water or fluid daily. If it's a different kind of fluid, lower calorie, maybe not Pepsis every day or something that'll also impact your bones or your health or your calorie intake. And I know there's some people who get nervous because of their bladder program, but I had someone, I was thinking about this morning, there was someone that I worked with many years ago who was so concerned about having an accident that he wouldn't drink water before working out and he wouldn't drink fluids while we were working out. And we ended up having to call an ambulance one day because he just passed out. So it makes me nervous. Please think of your health. And particularly if you've increased your fiber intake, you need to balance that with an increase in fluid because as many of you have probably experienced, if you consume high fiber without water, it could lead to very uncomfortable side effects like cramping, bloating, constipation, and those are no fun. And this little water drop is just my plug for recycling. Those of you who know me know I'm kind of crazy about reuse some sort of water bottle. It says, I don't need a cap and label, I look better naked. That's the water speaking. Nutrition also plays an important role for your skin. So in the healing of pressure sores, better nutrition is going to help your body heal better, period. And also being overweight or underweight can increase your risk of skin breakdown. So being severely underweight is just putting more pressure on between your bones and skin on different surfaces. And if you're overweight, there's also more pressure because of increased mass, and it's more difficult to transfer, so you're more likely to slide your skin across a surface, and weight shifts become more difficult. So there's a lot of reasons that you should keep your nutrition in check. So for everyone, a healthy diet is going to help with better energy, maintain your skin health, avoid diabetes and obesity. So in general, again, my general overview, eat regular meals, don't starve yourself until dinner. Typically, if you don't eat for a long portion of the day and then wait till you're starving, you're probably going to overeat, one. Two, when you're very hungry, your body goes into starvation mode and slows down. so you're not burning as many calories. So much better to eat regular meals, smaller portions, eat a variety of foods. I just like to throw whatever colors I can, and it ensures that you get different kinds of vitamins and minerals. And your body does use food better than supplements to get vitamins and minerals. And be very aware of your portion sizes. This again is a link that's in the resources part of this, at the end of this presentation, that gives a guide for nutrition for people with spinal cord injuries. So on to shoulders. I won't attempt to say his last name because I'll botch it, but he's a 5-time wheelchair bodybuilding champion and has shoulders that look better than most of my very fit, able-bodied friends. So, yeah, you'd think. So the importance of shoulders. I don't see him, although I thought he was supposed to be here. Some of you guys know this guy on the left is Dan Cummings from Journey Forward. So Dan walks most of the time with his walker, but you can see his shoulders are holding a lot of weight, even though I know he does a whole lot with his legs. And I've seen his shoulders, and they're very developed in the front part. This gentleman on the left, I don't know who he is. I found him on the web, but it was it was just showing a different kind of walker. And here's someone using braces so they can support more weight into their legs, but they're using parallel bars. And again, you can see his shoulders are up and forward. And that's typically what happens. If your world has shortened to this space in front of your wheelchair, everything's going to be in front of you. And most of us have poor postures anyway because we're driving or we're in front of our computers or doing something. So the anterior muscles get overdeveloped and the posterior muscles have a harder time keeping up. More so for spinal cord injuries, it's important because of the presence of pain. There was a statistic that I saw that said 100% of manual wheelchair users will experience shoulder pain in the course of their life. But the statistics go anywhere from 50 to 100% of wheelchair users, period. Wrist pain and carpal tunnel syndrome is present in 30 to 70%. That's a really, really high number. And the pain doesn't just impact how you're propelling yourself, it can impact how you take care of yourself. If you have pain in the front of your shoulder and it gets so bad that you can't lift your hand, there's a lot of ways you can't take care of yourself. Transfer skills become difficult, and pain in general is related to a lower quality of life. Nobody likes that. So it's important to get a proper education on maintaining the health and integrity of your shoulders and a proper assessment. So educate yourself is the best way. Prevention is the best way to keep your shoulders healthy. Know what risks of injury you have, what means of prevention, what's the best wheelchair setup you can have, know what your treatment options are if you need to go the route of surgery or managing pain with some sort of pharmaceutical, and understand the need to maintain fitness. Also keep in mind if your living surroundings change and you have different needs, your furniture changes, your entry into your house is a steeper ramp, go back and get another evaluation with your OT or your PT to find out if there's something you need to change to keep your body healthier. Get a clinical assessment for transfer techniques. What's the best way to propulse your wheelchair? What equipment is best for you? And where your current health status is. As we age, we all deteriorate and develop different kinds of compensations. So go and get your checkups and make sure to have a thorough eval. I've had a lot of friends who are young guys who hate the idea of using a minivan, and they like to have big fun trucks that have a fancy lift in the back, and then it also requires them to grip the handle and pull themselves up into their cars, and it makes me cringe every time. But yes, it does look cooler. Makes you feel any better. I, for the most part, drive a minivan. But you may need to go the route, if shoulder pain is persistent, going from a manual chair to a power chair, which would require changing from a fancy car into a bigger, more obtrusive car. So one of the cons, decreased transportability, increased maintenance. They're more expensive chairs. There's more things that can go wrong because there's electric things, as we know from the beginning of this presentation. There's an increased cost, possible weight gain because that's less activity that you're doing throughout the day, and a possibility of decreased fitness if that's your main way of having fitness. But the pros of going from a manual chair to a power chair would be reduced incidence of pain due to propulsion, so pushing the wheels, reduced fatigue, increased speed. There's some people I know of who've gone away to college and used to have manual chairs, but their college campus is very hilly. And it's difficult enough as someone who's able-bodied to get between classes on time. So imagine you're traversing terrain and you have to push yourself. So it helps with inclines and hills and helps conserve your energy. So other things to keep in mind: perform level transfers whenever possible. Avoid impingement of your shoulder whenever possible, so don't lean into it. Avoid placing your hand on a flat surface during transfers if possible, if there's some sort of grip you can use. And everybody's favorite, vary your leading arm. Everyone wants to go with their dominant side, but there's going to be situations where that's not so easy. So it's nice to know that you can transfer from both sides and you keep it balanced on both sides. So there's people who ask, well, okay, so my level of injury is higher and I just can't exercise the muscles in the back, or I don't have any function below my traps, so what can I do? Well, fortunately, I work for a company that makes something that you can do. The arm bike that Spalding has, Boston Medical Center now has, Journey Forward has, can be set up to stimulate the muscles that you can't actively contract on your own to help balance out. So there's a shoulder channel that's designed to stabilize your shoulders, to get your shoulder blades back and down into a nice safe position. You can stimulate this is Andrea here cycling. She's got her wrist extensors that are being stimmed, so even though her arms are gloved in, she's strengthening the muscles that help her use her tenodesis for grasp. Triceps and shoulders. I really like this for some of my guys that do wheelchair sports and are really developing their muscles very powerfully forward, because I'll set up the stim on their low back to force them into a better posture and to help balance out the muscles in their core. So I really think it can be a fantastic tool for a lot of people. So moving on to standing. In order to be upright, or if your goal is to be upright and walking, you first need to stand. If you can't tolerate being upright in a passive position, it's going to be very difficult to be upright for an extended period of time to walk. So there's a lot of benefits of standing, the pressure relief in itself. If you think about it, for the most part now, you're in a flexed position. So just to get up and extend everything and balance out the muscles, get range of motion while loading into your feet, to lengthen out the gastrocs, lengthen out the hip flexors. A lot of people have problems with tight hip flexors. Improve circulation, because everything's opened up now. You're not crunched on your internal organs. And especially for little peanuts that are injured when they're young, to aid in normal skeletal development so they're not growing into a flexed position. And the video I'm going to show you, I want you to notice the stuff this guy has in his room. So it shows somebody, standing can be more dynamic than just getting up into a passive standing frame. Although I know a lot of people that have UBEs affixed onto the front. They have trays where they do their homework or watch TV. But this video shows a glider, but check out all the stuff this guy's got in his room. Oh no. This should play. Oh, there, yes.
Hi, this is Jaden, and I'm in the Easy Stand Glider, and I'm feeling great range of motion in my hips, my arms. It's helped strengthen my shoulders, getting a good stretch in, and also this is a movement I've never experienced before if you're just standing still. So it's given me help decreasing my spasms, and it's just feeling good everywhere. Enjoying a little workout, burning some calories.
He's got a walker, so he probably has some sort of braces for brace walking. I see his computer in the background. I don't know him personally, but I assume he's in school. So that's someone who's obviously very active and proactive about their health. And this is just a cool video. If you haven't heard of what they're doing at the Cleveland FES Center, they do implanted. And this is someone whose name is Jen French. There we go. She has stim implanted. She actually just went back to have surgery and has now 24 channels of stim implanted. She's a C6-7 injury. And the stim is implanted in her quads, hamstrings, adductors, glutes, abdominals, and her low back, so that she can stand when she needs to grab something out of the cabinet and wants to do dishes, whatever she needs to do standing. I know she uses it quite a bit for transfers. She also has this really great website called the Neurotech Network, where any kind of neurotechnologies, she has all sorts of education about it. She knows all about what's going on, whether it's clinical trials or available for therapies. So it's a pretty neat thing. I believe that video is on her website as well. Exercise, everybody's favorite thing. I love down here on the right, it says, what fits your busy schedule better, exercising an hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? So it doesn't need to be so extreme, but I hear so many excuses, whether it's from my friends who have spinal cord injuries or from my able-bodied friends who are just lazy. Some people love to exercise, some people hate to exercise. It's so important to keep yourself healthy and to exercise, especially when you have a spinal cord injury. A decrease in physical activities causes all sorts of health issues: diabetes, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis. For the spinal cord population, overuse injuries, pressure sores. It's not fun stuff. It's expensive stuff. It's stuff that takes you away from having a really good and full quality of life. And I have heard every single additional barrier you can think of. Well, there's no accessible equipment that I can use. Transportation's an issue. I can't exercise because the equipment that's offered at my local gym doesn't allow me to exercise. It's not built for someone who has a spinal cord injury. So I'll talk about that. And I love to quote Wise when I speak about exercise with spinal cord injury, because he has said, exercise is not sufficient for recovery, but it is necessary for recovery. So there's no miracle workout routine that's going to get you up and walking. It is a lot of hard work, but again, needing to meet the science halfway, you have to exercise. And there's all these positive benefits that can happen if you exercise, so why not? I like the bottom ones: the better weight control, less anxiety and depression, enhanced feeling of well-being. I swear there's times I leave the gym and my clothes don't fit any better, but I feel like they should. Protecting against chronic diseases, and for you guys, an improvement in your ability to perform activities of daily living. If you're stronger and you have better endurance, life is just going to be easier. So for everybody, the recommended amount is 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week. Basically, it's more consistency than anything else, so just having a gym membership isn't going to get you fit. You need to actually use it more than once in a while. And it's important to take care of the different parts of exercise, so not just lifting weights, but aerobic and therapeutic. I think sports or some sort of activity that you do with other people is so important, to get out and have some sort of social network and something else that you do in the day that you can talk about and feel good about. So for aerobic, you have to work the large muscles of the body and work them hard enough to get your breathing and heart rate up. So I've seen it with the FES bike, with people who are high-level cervical injuries, where it's the only way they can get their heart rate up is when we're getting the big contractions from the muscles of the lower legs, and they're huffing and puffing, and they go, this is so weird because I don't feel like I'm doing anything, but your body's doing a lot of work. So arm biking, body weight support treadmill training, which Molly and whoever spoke, there was someone else who spoke last week about the NRN program, FES cycling, swimming. For strength, TheraBands, hand weights, there's wrist weights, there's all sorts of adapted stuff. Adapted sports, I could go on and on, but I know up here FES rowing is a big thing, hand cycling, sailing. Actually, Jen, who has that implanted stim system, she's a Paralympic sailor and a really just cool woman in general. Horseback riding, skiing, rugby, there's all sorts of stuff, and I've got some pictures in here. And then my favorite, the psychological benefits, just getting out, having a social outlet, and looking better. So exercise, if you live in a remote area, and I've been to some very remote areas in my travels, if you're not near a place where you can exercise, it's perfectly possible to exercise at home. This picture on the left is someone that I've worked with who over time has built his living room into a home gym, and he has a very understanding fiance who has allowed him to do this. And I believe he's bought these pieces of equipment over time. There's a total gym, there's a universal machine, a standing frame, just finding stuff online, looking on Craigslist, looking on CareCure for what people are getting rid of. This guy down here on the right, Matt, this is him on his FES bike at home, and I know that his insurance actually covered that for him. And I see he's got a Bosu ball in the back. I don't know what he does with it, but I hope it's something safe. So how do we overcome the barriers? Right? Get into a routine is the most important thing. I travel so much, I know that if I don't get up in the morning and do it, it's not going to get done. So it's just become a part of my routine to get up. It's built into my life. So get some sort of equipment for home, and make sure you let your caregivers or loved ones know that it's important to you and you need it to be part of your life, because I know family relationships sometimes can be difficult. But if they understand that this is important and it's valuable, then it's just another thing that you do. Get involved in adaptive sports. Find out what your insurance may cover. Some people don't know. They've never pursued it because they thought, well, it's probably not going to because insurance doesn't cover anything. But it does, and there's a lot of people that work for different companies that will work very hard for you to try to get things covered. So I know standing frames have been covered for home, of course the FES bike, different kinds of foot drop stimulators if they're appropriate for you. And then if you're having a hard time getting something covered, be creative. I know someone who had a standing frame built out of plumbing supplies, and I cringed the first time I saw it. But he's safe, he's got a program, and I'm not suggesting anything, but be safe no matter what you do. Get yourself some exercise. And use your community. Everybody's gonna benefit. So what, there's not a lot of people with spinal cord injuries in your neighborhood? I'm sure there's people who have MS or who have had a stroke or doing some sort of cardiovascular rehab, and they aren't able to use the equipment at the gym. So Cheryl runs the adaptive program at the Quincy Y, and I'm sure she'd be happy to talk about how she got her program up and going, and it's a fantastic program, which I have pictures of if you haven't been there. So it's grown over time, and it's a collaboration of donations and research and fundraisers, but they have this great section that has a universal machine. They have 3 FES bikes. They've got new steps and standing frames, a big table for stretching and that sort of thing. And I think the best thing is people getting out, going somewhere. Cheryl says it's on a public access line. So that's one part of making that program successful. But I know people who carpool to different fitness programs when it's difficult. Yes, I didn't have a picture. Thank you, I would have forgotten that. There's also a VitaGlide there. This is another community exercise program. This just shows one of my favorite people on the FES bike talking about her experience with it. But a little bit of background, her name is Lois, and she's a low T injury, and I spoke to her. She's so diligent about getting to this program called Push to Walk in New Jersey, getting there and riding the bike 3 times a week. And I said, do you want to look into seeing if your insurance will pay for it? And she said, no, part of it is the social piece, seeing my friends, being around other people, and it's a good community. So she's just talking about her experience.
I bet I've been riding for 3 years, maybe. And I'm usually here for an hour by the time we put the pads on and get set up. And I probably ride for 48, 50 minutes. And I definitely notice a change in the size of my muscles that are being exercised, the quads, because last year I wasn't able to use the bike for about 4 months, and my quads just atrophied during that time. I know it gets the circulation moving, and it's a workout where I have to breathe harder and my heart's pumping more, sweating some.
Whenever I stop into Push to Walk and she's there, and I always go to give her a big hug, and it's usually right after she rides, and her face is flushed, and she's always apologizing to me for being sweaty, but that's fine because I love hugs. And this is my favorite picture of Lois, and I stole it off her Facebook, so Lois, please forgive me. This is at one of the Life Rolls on Surf events, and just that smile is fantastic. Here's another one of my favorite people. His name is Mike, and he rides for Team Reeve. This was actually the Boston Marathon, and I think this is one of the best pictures of adaptive sports. He's a great guy, and talk about somebody who's motivating to others. He's motivating to me. I hear about what he's doing, or I see what he's doing, and he's in graduate school, and he substitute teaches for his sister's elementary school class. He coaches able-bodied softball. He's just such a dynamic person, has a much fuller social life than I could ever keep up with. But it's a very cool picture. And then if you don't have the ability to hand cycle, or you're just not interested in it, or maybe your level of interest is a little bit higher, this picture is just sent to me from a friend who went up to Quebec and went hiking, and he's a higher level injury, but he had some friends and some strong volunteers who have, it looks dark on this big projection, but it's called a trail rider. So basically someone has to hold in the front and in the back, but he got out on all these great trails. And I thought that was just the neatest thing. I'm constantly learning about these new kinds of equipment that I didn't even know existed. So that was pretty neat. And then if you needed any inspiration, I'm always inspired by this slide. This is Ricky James, and he has a T-level injury finishing Hawaii Ironman Kona. That's pretty impressive. And his jersey is an organization called Challenged Athletes Foundation. If you haven't heard of it and you're into hardcore hand cycling, or if you know anyone who does amputee racing, they're a fantastic organization based out of Southern California. And I should have a slide in here, but I don't. Most important muscle to exercise is your brain. People who have more education or know more have a better quality of life. That's a statistic I found somewhere, so take it or leave it, but very important muscle. And then life now. In the meantime, it's really encouraging, all the science that's out there, and we have so many smart people who are working for your best interests and have the greatest hopes for what their science is going to do. But it could take a long time, and it's so important not just to have that long-term goal, to have short-term goals in between, other things that you can achieve, because if you're just working on one long-term goal and even if you're progressing towards it, but it's slow, it can make life exceptionally difficult. So I like this quote: "The major reason for setting a goal is what it makes of you to accomplish it. What it makes of you will always be the far greater value than what you get." So again, both long-term and short-term goals are important, and they could be daily goals, they could be weekly goals, they could be monthly goals. I could talk about living life now, but I'm standing before you, and it's a lot easier for me. So there is a really fantastic guy named Scott, who I have the great pleasure of knowing, and he's an international life coach and speaker. He speaks all over the place, and he's fantastic. So I asked him if I could interview him, and I told him very briefly what this was about, and he said, yeah, sure, just turn the camera on. So I apologize for the lighting. I'm not very good at this kind of thing, but I think his message is really fantastic.
Creating a balanced life has been a lifelong journey for me, I should say, for the last 25 years that I've been paralyzed. I think it's so important to basically go down two paths in life. Each and every day, I try to make a commitment. The one path is doing everything in my power to want to walk again, whether it be a visualization, some type of meditation, whatever it takes that really brings as much energy and as much excitement to walking again, to running again, to having my children on my shoulders, being able to run in the ocean with them. All those things that on one hand can make you very sad to think about because you don't have here in the moment, but I don't focus on that. I focus on, you know what, what kind of energy, not if, but when that day comes, when that happens, how much joy and excitement that's going to give me. I'll just lay there on my bed sometimes and I'll think of what the sensation felt like in my feet, in my legs. I'll think of myself out on a basketball court, making a fake left and going right, and reaching up to the basket and doing a layup. So everything that I remember in those first 15 years of life that brought me joy and excitement, and those things that I wanted to create before I became paralyzed. So that's one of the paths that I want to take in life, is one that says each and every day I'm going to do what I can to walk again. And there's a part of me that's a firm believer that I can actually wake up one morning and have full use of my legs, full use of my body. Yes, I know there'd be a lot of rehabilitation and a lot of things that would need to be done to actually support my legs and to get me going back to the point where I was independent again. But again, I don't think it's anything that needs to stop me. So again, there's this path that's so full of hope. And then there's a second path that I think is so full of hope as well. And that second path is about living life to its fullest, being in this wheelchair for the rest of my life. I just might be the happiest person at the end of this journey in this wheelchair. And it's because each and every day I focus on those things that are meaningful in the here and now. Okay, I don't have the use of my legs. Okay, life is a challenge and a struggle from time to time. But here, I always say, for every one thing that I can't do, there's 10,000 things that I still can. And one of those things that really help me first thing in the morning is to be in gratitude. In gratitude for those things that maybe I take advantage of or take for granted on a daily basis, is that those are the things I focus on. I give thanks to my wheelchair for getting me around on a daily basis. I give thanks to the cushion that I'm sitting on that allows me to alleviate pressure from time to time. But you know what, really going down a list of things on a daily basis, almost like a personal self-inventory, whether it be personal, whether it be my marriage, whether it be my children, being a good father, whether it be financial, whether it be my career, whether it be hobbies, friendships, family, relatives, you name it, is that I go down a self-inventory list and I make sure that each and every one of these aspects of my life is that I'm giving incredible attention to. Because I know, I have those days when, you know what, I'm struggling and I have a challenge. It just happened the other day when I was speaking, is that I gave a great presentation. I had rave reviews, and all of a sudden there was a part of me that was like, you know, I'm feeling a little sluggish today. What's going on? And all of a sudden I did a quick self-inventory. And I went down this area, and all of a sudden I got to health. And all of a sudden I said to myself, you know what, I'm eating a lot of junk food. I'm on the road, is I'm not eating that food that really charges my battery, makes me really perform at top level. So while I got through the presentation, everything is that I felt this sluggishness. So right away, contacted the front of the hotel and I said, you know, where's a good healthy place to eat? They informed me of where it was, not too far from my hotel. Put this great gasoline in my system, and guess what? All of a sudden that smile came back, and I felt like I was back in alignment. And it can be that easy, to the point where, you know what, it's about living life to its fullest in this wheelchair. There's not one person on this face of this earth that isn't dealing with some kind of obstacle, some type of challenge. But again, you give so much attention. Someone said, so shall you reap. You give that kind of attention to anything in your life, things that you don't want to create, boom, you're going to create that. Illness, a bad day, you name it. Or you know what, you put enough attention into something that's positive, and you know what, it's going to give you that energy that you need to not only survive in that moment, but thrive in that moment. That's what I'm about. I'm about, you know what, I've survived my paralysis. I've survived the last 25 years, absolutely. But I also say that every day, it's going to become about thriving. It's going to be about thriving. I'm going to be the best father that I can be. I'm going to be the best husband that I can be. I'm going to be the best businessman that I can be, the best friend that I can be. And when I get done with this, guess what? I realize at the end of the day, at the end of these past 25 years, it has absolutely nothing to do with my wheelchair. I tell people the only place a true disability can reside is in one's attitude. And that's a choice. Another great quote I love is, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. We're going to experience pain, and I think it really helps us in this journey of life. It's the suffering that I believe is a choice, and not to judge anyone, but you know what? Is there always a choice to suffering? Yeah, it's called not suffering and realizing what's fantastic about your life. So this balance of focusing on a daily basis, of getting back on my feet, regaining the use of my legs, boom, that's one path. The second path that I focus on is just basically being in this wheelchair for the rest of my life and being the happiest guy, to the point where at the end of this journey, there is going to be no resentment, no disappointment. There's just going to be a smile on my face, and hopefully, a job well done, to the point where, you know what, I have served myself first and taken care of myself, but I've done as much as I can for myself so that I can provide even a bigger service, and that's to others.
Scott's fantastic. Really, if you haven't heard of him before, check out his website. And I want to dedicate this to my good friend Jim McLaren, who passed away a few weeks ago. If you needed another inspirational story, go on his website. It's another resource for you. He was hit by a bus on his bike in Manhattan and lost his leg below the knee in the early 80s. Went on to become a top athlete in marathon and triathlon. And this was before we had these really fancy carbon fiber, lightweight prosthetics. Then 8 years later was on racing in a triathlon. The course marshal misjudged an oncoming car and Jim's speed on his bike. And he was hit by the car and headlong into a signpost and broke his neck at C5. And he got up and in the hospital and was like, really? How does this happen twice? And thinking, you know, how do I do this again? Knowing the grueling therapy he went through first time around, and understanding how challenging this was going to be now, not only as an amputee, but someone with a cervical level spinal cord. And ultimately he said, you know what, life is too good, and it's worth it for me. And because of him, he's part of the reason that we have Challenge Athletes Foundation. He's one of the original founders. And prior to his passing, he was also a motivational speaker, so he's got a pretty fantastic website. A few years ago, he won an ESPY. He was a pretty spectacular guy. So if you need more inspiration, that's where you can find it. And if anyone has the ability ever to go to a Unite to Fight Paralysis Working to Walk, this year it's in November in Phoenix. It's really a fantastic symposium. The people who are doing different kinds of cell interventions for spinal cord all come out. They are so gracious with their time. So they talk about what their therapies are, and then they hang out and will sit with you one-on-one all day and night. I've seen it every year that I've gone. It's a really great group of ladies who's doing it. So this year we got together and decided to do a fundraiser for Unite to Fight Paralysis to provide scholarships and keep this very grassroots organization going to provide this information to patients. So we did Seattle Marathon just this past June, and this is us at the end. So thank you again for your time and attention, and any questions that you have, I'm happy to answer them now. Thank you. Yes?
Two questions.
Yes.
One, part of my injury was separation of my shoulder, so trying to show how to basically propose that at some point I would need to have surgery to get my shoulder fixed. I think out of that for about a year. And is it something this, for a shoulder health standpoint and being ready for these studies, is it better to get this done sooner rather than later?
I would say for your health, period, it's better to get it sooner than later. It's going to be a year before it's repaired.
Well, basically, they said that to get healed and back to basically the level of ability that I have today, between healing and getting physical therapy to get my muscle strength built back up and so on, would be about a year. And then the second question is, if you do have problems getting equipment and getting insurance to cover things like FES, is there any information sites on like how to build your own FES thing? I mean, it's electronics. How come, is there stuff where I could get out my soldering iron and build out my own system for some reason?
If you look on CareCure, you can find people who have tried and have documented along the way. It's not very easy. What my suggestion would be is look into, there's an organization that I thought of afterwards, I can't believe that I should have put, there's an organization called NTAF, NTAF.org. And they have a catastrophic injury division where they help people figure out, identify who in their community is a good person to help with any kind of fundraisers or that sort of thing. And they hold an account in your honor. It's a nonprofit account, so any money that people donate to you in your honor is not held against any state aid that you get or that sort of thing. And they're really great at helping with fundraising ideas and stuff. If that's not an option, I'd look into a program that has options for accessible equipment offered under wellness, because often a lot of programs that I know of, and I'm all over the Northeast, that have these kinds of programs have a sliding scale fee, and it's really quite reasonable. And especially if you have an issue with your shoulder, you want some sort of supervision. You definitely want to go and in terms of when's the best time to get your shoulder surgery, that's something you need to consult with your physician and a therapist to see and evaluate what do you do in your everyday life, what's going to be impacted, because a year's a long time. So, but it will be, as you saw with these slides with standing, it's going to be important to bear weight in your shoulder, and if you have a shoulder that's unstable, it's going to impact what you're able to do. So.
Right, this is kind of where I've been, the advice I seem to be getting right now, and I can't have trouble getting a straight answer, is push it off as long as I can, but I'm somewhat, it's a chronic pain issue. I'm able to get around fairly well with it, but it's, like I say, it's painful. I've been looking at the Spalding rowing program, and they're saying that they're very hesitant about whether I'd be eligible for it because of the chronic motion problems with
Yes.
the shoulder. And so, you know, whether it would keep me from being able to participate in some of these strengthening programs.
Well, until you have something that helps that shoulder heal, there's going to be a lot of precautions for you.
It's a class 3 separation. Apparently, they basically said there's nothing they can do with shoulder surgery or strengthening PT type stuff. But
I'd have a very thorough conversation with your physician about what the options are, what rehab's going to entail. I'm very cautious not to give advice.
I realize you're in that position, but I'm just kind
Yes,
of trying to get a feel for.
If you're looking at having the best physical condition that you can as a potential candidate, you've got time, and in making yourself the best candidate you can be, it's definitely a conversation to have with your physician and something to consider. Because thinking about rowing and knowing about upper extremity FES cycling, it's a big precaution. If we can't have a stable shoulder, there's a lot that people aren't going to want to do or are going to caution you against doing. So look into your options.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Yes?
Sorry to have a name, but the last 2 years at the conference in October, we've been talking with Hans.
Hans Kierstead.
Yeah.
Yes.
UCLA.
Uh-huh.
Familiar with what he's doing?
Yes.
I know they can't post what he's doing because it's research. Do you know where he's left off from the last conference? He was working with clinical
From
trials.
when he spoke here last?
Last year.
I know that he's been very diligently continuing to work, and a lot of the data that he has is in this phase 1. So the Geron trials that were supposed to start and then were halted, are supposed to start again. That was his therapy that he created.
Started after he left last year.
Yes, and there was, looking at safety data, FDA said, wait, we need more data. And mind you, if you can picture a box that you would get a ream of computer paper in, you know, that cardboard box, the safety data that they submitted was 4 boxes full. And they still had to go back and review. So again, giving you an idea of this time frame and why it takes so long. So he's working on some projects, and I believe he's got 3 different ones that can potentially help people in different phases of spinal cord, so chronic, subacute, and acute. And it's really, any of the scientists will tell you, it's a matter of getting funding so that they can get their phase 1 trials going. They're all really very confident that there's not going to be a safety issue, but they need to get past that first barrier.
His therapy was MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, spinal cord injury,
spinal muscular
and chronic
atrophy.
pain, but he was trying to get
Yes.
it all to work together.
Yeah, so what he's done is he's looked at the neurophysiology of these different diseases and how they relate to different phases of spinal cord. So it's quite smart because, remember, spinal cord injury is a pretty small population.
He was hoping to get funding.
Yes. So he's still trying to get funding. I think there's one slated for next year with the spinal muscular atrophy one. But it's going to come down to getting past FDA to say, yes, you can go ahead with phase 1, and then showing that it's safe before you can go to phase 2. He's usually pretty open about where he's at along each phase. He's not speaking at Working to Walk this year, and I'm not sure where he's speaking next. But if you look up Irvine or California Stem Cell, you could usually see where he's speaking and get it straight from him.
One last thing.
Yeah.
I've been going to the Quincy YMCA for 5 years now.
Uh-huh.
And Cheryl's done a lot. Cheryl over there, raise your hand, Cheryl. She's done a lot for the program. We were having problems with the bikes probably 2 years ago.
No,
this is a good thing, but she doesn't like to fly. And so she went on her own time to New Jersey and took the train there and got the problem straightened out, and she always makes sure we all have parking. She got 10 spaces for us at the Y, and she's just gone beyond what she was supposed to do there. So I just want to say thank you, Cheryl.
I will also agree, Cheryl is
I'm
awesome.
not good with speeches here, so. Yes,
Thank you.
Hi, I also work out at the Quincy Y, and I love Cheryl too. One question I had though, I know in the slideshow you showed a person who had a bike at their house, and just because I have a really busy schedule, I travel a lot and I work, so I don't always get to go to the gym. I'm wondering, is it becoming more successful to get the bike paid for by insurance, or do you know if it will be in the future?
Yes. Actually, spinal cord injury is the population that we have the greatest success getting covered at home. And there's an inside team. I work mostly with the clinics, but there's an inside team there that has every different kind of resource to help the therapist that you work with provide the best letter of medical necessity, and they work with everyone from start to finish, including submitting to insurance, going after appeals when it's denied. So
I've tried that in the past, but I don't know, do you know if it's changed? It was probably 2 or 3 years ago.
The success rate now I've been working with the bike since 2007 and with the company for about 1.5 years full time. The success rate that I've seen has continued to increase over time. So it's possible. If there's no other questions, I have,
I think there are questions online.
Oh.
So it's okay.
All right, before we start on the online questions, I have to thank Steve for helping all my videos work. Thank you, Steve. Yes. Yes. You know what, I didn't leave them over there, but if you need one sooner than later, just grab me.
We have a few questions online here, and there is a lot of interest in how people can get access to this type of equipment if they can't afford it, and if they're located anywhere across the country. So not just for people in a particular area or, in the Boston area here right now.
Yes.
So if you could address that, Lindsay.
Yeah, for restorative therapies, there's different people in the office in Baltimore who can, if you call the 800 number, it's 800-609-9166, and just say where you're from, you'll be directed to somebody who serves your area, who knows not only what insurances are more successful than others and will help with that process, but also what other resources are out there if insurance isn't likely. So if there's personal grants or different kinds of funding, or if there's some sort of wellness program available. In terms of the other equipment that I mentioned, I know that Easy Stand on their website, they have a lot of resources to help get a standing frame covered, and they have representatives in different parts of the country. You'd have to look on their website, and the same with Bioness or WalkAid. They also, all these companies that have had success with insurance, do their best to help you to get it.
Thank you. And if there are any resources that could help people, maybe we can get them later and I can circulate that to people.
Yes, absolutely.
We have another question. There's so much medical tourism out there. How can someone with SCI weave through all the hype and find a credible clinical trial?
There's a handout that's at the front. And Judy, is that also online? That 4-page handout?
Yes, we will make sure
Okay.
Everybody who on the webcast has received it, and it's certainly available to everybody here as well.
So if you go on clinicaltrials.gov, there's a list of questions that you should ask. The best thing you can do across the board is be well informed. Ask questions, talk to other people who have gone through it, talk to the doctors. If anything seems weird or you can't get a straightforward answer, ask more questions. I'd be cautious outside the states. I know a lot of people are tired of waiting here and they raise a bunch of money and they'll go somewhere else. I'd be cautious of any therapies that you don't hear of any negative side effects, or they claim there's no negative side effects, because even in controlled studies where there's a placebo group, there's always something that happens. So just be very aware of that. Gather information. CareCure is carecure.org is the center that's run under Wise Young at Rutgers, and a lot of people talk about their experiences with different therapies. It's a really great support network. People are very open and will share information. Wise is very, very diplomatic in sharing information that he's gathered or he knows of for trials that are out there. So talk to people. Make an informed decision.
We have another question that is, should I start bugging our congressman to pressure the FDA and
Yes.
everybody else?
If you go, there's a great advocacy toolkit on unitetoFightParalysis.org. That's also listed as a resource. And the Reeve Foundation provides an advocacy toolkit, and they walk you through the steps of what you can do to push the your state representatives, the federal representatives, to get some of these laws to pass and to get more funding into clinical trials in the states. So make your voice heard.
Do you recommend any stem cell treatment programs in other countries? I'm a case manager, and my clients are always asking me where they can go.
No.
And I think this will also be addressed at the conference, as Susan Hawley from the Christopher Reeve Foundation will be discussing research initiatives very extensively.
Yes, people will I have my opinions, but I'm not a scientist, I'm not a medical doctor. My opinions are formed from information that I know of people who have gone for these procedures and outcomes that I've seen, and I can't, not being a science person, I can't not be biased. So it would be unfair of me to answer that question. Susan would be a much better resource.
And would it be helpful to start bugging occupational therapists and physical therapists to get access to equipment?
A lot of the therapists that people have worked with truly want the best in everything for their patients. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't make the ultimate decision. But if enough people go to, administration in a clinic and say they want something available for them, if they see that there's a demand, then they'll be more likely to consider it and put in funding.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, another question.
I know I just watched through your clinical presentations. I was wondering, for some of us that have a 24/7 work, that do work and do other kind of things, do a lot of transfers, travels, driving, just for themselves. Is that calculated as part of an exercise or keeping fit? And how does that incorporate into fitness?
Being active in general, having an active lifestyle?
Yes.
If you're more active and constantly moving around, you're definitely burning more calories, but you also have to take into consideration other factors. If you travel a lot for work, you're probably eating out more and less aware of portion sizes. If you're in unfamiliar beds and even rooms that are accessible or places that claim they're accessible, you typically are going to run into more barriers and have more things to be cautious of. I mean, I've stayed in accessible rooms, and I don't know how they can call it accessible. So on the one hand, possibly, most likely, unless you have access to some sort of equipment or you have a routine you can take with you, it might balance itself out. I do know someone, well, Scott travels quite a bit, and he'll try to find the hotel gym, but he's also has function his upper extremities. When he's at home, he's very diligent about his workout routine. He also has a standing frame and a FES bike. I do know someone who travels quite a bit and brings DVDs that she can do from her chair, so she gets her fitness in. I find myself have to do the same thing. So it may make it a little bit harder, and you have to be more intentional to fit or be creative to squeeze in fitness while you're traveling. Just being more mobile doesn't necessarily translate to exercise, but possibly. Didn't really answer your question.
I was trying to see if there's a formula that incorporates the whole activities into the whole calculation of being fit.
Oh, you wanted a formula?
Yeah.
Oh, there's no existing formula. It's so individual. Everybody's, because you have to look at what your level of injury is, what kind of wheelchair you use, how do you get from one place to another. So if you travel a lot for work but you have a power chair and you're not doing any kind of activity, then it doesn't really matter. I don't think it's any different than being at home. So it's just how much do you physically move your body per day versus how many calories do you put in your mouth?
Well, I said that because the brain does work, and the brain utilizes energy.
Oh, yes.
When you do that 24/7, you're burning a lot of calories.
Mm-hmm.
And not talking about other movements you make, picking up papers, pen, writings, typing and all those kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Transferring both cars, toiletry, everything, just for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, when you travel, you encounter a lot of barriers, and that is true. But you maneuver them, you get through them. For sometimes, so you have to call the front desk to come and help you to get up. So yes, those things happen. But I was wondering, how do you incorporate the whole activity to the calculation of being healthy?
It would be a very individual calculation. I couldn't calculate that for you without knowing what your nutritional intake is, what your activities are every day, what your height is, what your weight is, and then I'd say I'm not the person to do that.
All right, if we don't have any more questions, we'll wrap it up. Lindsay, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you,
This was great.
Thank you.